Hello, this is Darren Pulsifer, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, Use Cases in Confidential Computing with special guest host Dr. Anna Scott interviewing Ibett Acarapi and Jesse Schrater.
So Ibett, you had mentioned in your intro that you have also been working with artificial intelligence, and so I was hoping you could kind of provide some more information to say, how does confidential computing actually work in the world of artificial intelligence, especially with how you do those, how you do your model developments, how you do your deployment of those. Is there a role there, and can you walk us through the relevance there?
Yeah. So, everyone's really talking about artificial intelligence, but
everyone.
Yeah. So as we know, like your models are going to be as good as your training, as good as your data, right? So how diversified you have your data, how much of it you're doing your training, and how big is it, right? Because then you have like the whole diversity in it. So with confidential computing, you're able to protect your AI models and that confidential data that you're going to be working, that
of course,
enabling you to provide better training models and be able to give you a more diverse data and be able to collaborate with other experts or other, even within your own enterprise, to enable more use cases. Because if you are kind of on your silo and you have just one kind of model and one kind of data, you're going to keep getting the same kind of training models. You're going to keep getting kind of the same trainings. But when you expand that and you're able to collaborate with others, you're getting bigger models now. But you can protect them. You don't have to be able to. You don't have to be able to expose everything. You can protect your data and be able to also protect your AI models, which can be very proprietary, right? So you're enabling also the developers to be able to collaborate. You're enabling the industry to be able to get better models, and you're enabling to actually get a lot more fine-tuned training models to know what those results are in analysis to make better decisions.
So what that sounds like too is that for these trusted execution environments that are fundamental to confidential compute, they're pretty big, right? Because if you can deal with data sets that or the large type of data files that you need for training models, that's totally possible, right? There's not some size restriction that says this is only good if you're like this, if you're really small data or single image type stuff. You can get pretty advanced here, it sounds like, or pretty large sizes.
Yeah, absolutely. Intel SGX, which has that very granular level of control that's targeted towards just a single application, can handle memory spaces all the way up to a terabyte. And then Intel TDX, which does the isolation at the VM level, has no limit other than just the size of the instance that you provision it. So yes, we can definitely, we see full database, in-memory databases running inside enclaves and things like that.
So that is really good news then. Yeah, fantastic. So we've talked about how amazing this technology is. So can you give us some more details? And I think, Jesse, if you'll start this one off a bit, if there's anything to build on this, is how do folks actually use this, right? What are the best options? And Jesse, you already shared with us, look, this stuff is available today. The technology is absolutely in market. So how would somebody go about saying, I want this feature, I want to use it, how do I buy it today?
Yeah, I mean, a huge market has arisen in this space. I got started on this way back in 2017, and it felt like I was a lone voice in the wilderness, talking about confidential computing, and that's just not the case anymore. And in the early days, it took quite a bit of effort if you wanted to leverage confidential computing, and people were doing it, but they were advanced projects. I remember the famous indictment of somebody saying you have to have a PhD to use.
I remember this too.
Yeah. And that one stung a little bit, but there was some truth to it back in the day. And but fast forward to where we are today, and the big hyperscalers like Azure and GCP and IBM and Alibaba, they've all got confidential computing solutions in the market today. We've got, you can go to Azure's marketplace, provision an SGX instance, and have it up and running with a native TensorFlow, workload in Kubernetes within an hour. You don't have to know SGX. You don't have to write any SGX code, and boom, you can be running in an hour. And, you can also go to pretty much all of the major OEMs that you're used to working with to get servers for on-prem, and they're going to have SGX or boxes that can be provisioned with SGX because it exists on all of our server CPUs. And, there's also a whole list of global solutions integrators and software vendors that are serving segments like, financial services and healthcare and government, and covering all those big usages like cloud migration, multi-party analytics, IP and key protection, all of those kinds of things, solutions in the market today. So it's a pretty rich ecosystem with a lot of opportunity now. And you don't necessarily have to be a confidential computing development expert in order to take advantage of it, because there's plenty of solutions that allow native workloads to be migrated, kind of the lift and shift model, or for, new greenfield, cloud first type solutions to leverage the integration in a very seamless fashion. So, one of the big call outs I'd make to people about how to get started in confidential computing is start putting the requirement in your RFPs, right? Make your vendors bring the solution. One of the things we've seen is that most people just flat out aren't aware that this capability exists. And once they realize that exists, and once they realize that, this means I can manage my data in new ways and get, kind of the advantages of cloud or of multi-party compute on my sensitive data, now I want to find out how I can get it. And the reality is there's all these vendors out there already offering it, right? So put it in your RFPs and you'll get a vendor who will come forward and deliver it to you. And that's a great way to get started in there. And Intel is happy to be part of that process.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Also, being part of the team that kind of help bring this to collaborate with Azure, it's awesome to be in this side to bring that awareness. So I hope that application security professionals are jumping off their seats of excitement to know about this. I really hope that they're like, whoa, I know what confidential is gives me to, what they do day in, day out. But yeah, like Jesse said, bring the awareness, and if they have any question or they're just like, I don't really know how this can fit into my strategy, reach out to us. We are more than happy to just talk about like how is that going to be fitting into your overall goal and help you do that way.
Again, the security necessity is incredible. Like if you look at how data is being used today, and back to the stuff that you're covering, Ibett, with respect to artificial intelligence, having a way to take advantage of all of the amazing capabilities that are on the cloud with respect to AI tools, and do that in a way where you can trust your data and trust the model that's developed. That's just one example on top of the ones that Jesse had shared earlier, where, man, it's super important to know that there are more secure options where you can really protect your data while you're actually using it. I did want to ask, so how do security software companies fit into this? It sounds like you really don't need a security ISV to be able to take advantage of confidential compute within the cloud environments, because there's cloud environments that can already provide this. But I am curious, especially when you get outside the cloud environment or even within the cloud environment, can you enhance that by working with security software as well? I am not at all sure. So,
yeah, I think it's some of both. I mean, we see many end customers leveraging security software vendors just as a way to get into the space, because as with everything, things need integration. They need orchestration. There's plenty of aspects, and so leveraging an SI like an Accenture or Deloitte or Capgemini or some of the software vendors that are out there that specialize in these arenas, who maybe focus in a certain area like healthcare AI. And so they can take healthcare AI models and provide and, kind of integrate those with these added protections that are available. That certainly is happening. It's not required. A lot of organizations are doing it on their own or going directly to the CSP and just getting a provisioned instance with kind of minimal overhead required. So there's a kind of a mix depending on the level of granularity of protection that people are looking for. That can vary. And then we're starting to see a lot of the kind of traditional security software vendors looking at confidential computing, and not so much to offer some sort of instance or piece of software that they can offer confidential computing as like a container to their customer, but rather to start protecting their IP. If they've got a listener that sits on the network that monitors network traffic, why not protect that inside of an enclave so it cannot be manipulated by a potential malware attack? Or, we're bringing some third-party software into our environment for a security purpose. Why not protect that inside of an enclave so that it doesn't introduce an additional exposure into our environment? So we are seeing a lot of security software vendors starting to leverage confidential computing as a way to protect their IP and their solution that, again, sits in somebody else's network, right?
Well, okay. And kind of on the same vein, we talked, excuse me, we talked early on to say confidential compute has a real strength with respect to how do you protect yourself from your admins, right? And how do you protect your data from folks that really should not, who should be in the system doing a specific function, but really should not have the keys to the kingdom type thing. Is there a connection also in terms of how confidential compute helps against ransomware and some of the other things that are very top of mind that are causing people a lot of grief these days?
Yeah, ransomware is a kind of a broad type of attack that can have many different vectors and also many different actions in it. I don't think any single technology is a panacea that just erases the need. I think confidential computing is one of the things that can contribute to resistance against ransomware. One of the things that's common in ransomware is, there's some vector of attack, something where the person gets into the environment. And then typically through that vector of attack, they get to a place of an escalation of privileges. And once they have that, that allows them to do things like encrypt the data on the disk or move the data off to somewhere else, right? It allows them to do greater manipulations. So if your sensitive data or your critical data is protected inside of an enclave, one of the things that's often not talked about, we talk so much about confidentiality, the prevention of the wrong person being able to read the data. But what also is included in confidential computing is the prevention of anybody being able to modify or manipulate or change the data, integrity of the data. And so that also has a big implication or impact against ransomware, where often the kind of the end action of ransomware is manipulation or change or movement. And so those things are prevented through confidential computing as well.
And then, Ibett, I'm kind of curious, like, what are you most excited about, right? Because the world evolves every day. Security feels like it moves faster than even technology moves, and technology is like crazy fast, right? So how do you see the world of confidential computing changing, and what are the cool stuff that you expect to see coming up in the near future?
What excites me is when I tell customers about the technologies and the capabilities and how they're like, I can really use this. This is something I've been looking for. This is something that I can, show me how to actually get it done. And another part is with the cloud and all the different tools now, like not too long ago, even a cloud solutions architect, like there was no path to being a cloud solutions architect. Now there's certifications, there's a structured training, there's a ways that you can actually build. And somebody who doesn't even have a technology background, there's courses that you can just go into tech and be very good in tech and actually get trained, right? I've seen so many courses in that sector, and you're like, wow, I had no idea that, you know, you can do that transition so quick, where it would have taken before several years. Now with a structured path, there is ways in the technologies to allow to do that. So what gets me really excited is that where the technology understanding, awareness, all those capabilities, but also enabling it and seeing how customers really utilizing it and benefiting from it and saying, this is really helpful. This is something I've been looking for. I understand it. And these are the different places that I can really use this.
That is great to hear. And Jesse, anything to add to that?
You know, we have the inaugural confidential computing event called the Confidential Computing Summit coming up in San Francisco at the end of this month. And again, it's testament to how much the market has evolved to the point where we can support a whole summit just on that topic. And in there, I know that there's going to be lots of discussions about ways that confidential computing is evolving for the future, including big impacts on like Web3, blockchain, distributed ledgers, areas like that. Confidential containers are a huge area for cloud native development. So certainly there's a lot of that, you know, development coming, and you know, the perspective that, you know, as the future comes, confidential computing is almost going to become ubiquitous. I mean, why wouldn't you use it? You know, you can check the box and have it. So those are all exciting. But I know for me, as somebody who's been working in this space for a while and who has these technologies on our products today, what's also exciting is just that it's a now thing, right? It's something that can be used today. It's something that you can go to vendors and actually land your real life workload on today. And I think that may be the most exciting thing. I am looking forward to what's coming in the future, but I think we've got a big chunk of that future here now. That's
beautiful. Good. Well, we're pretty much close to time. I did want to do just like a final wrap and say, you know, we've tried to cover this pretty well and just make sure there's good awareness around confidential compute. Any final comments, anything that we missed that occurs to you now that you'd like to say before we go ahead and close?
For me,
hopefully we've done a good job. But
yeah, I know. Thank you for inviting us. For me, it would be just, if you have any question, reach out to us. We are excited to help customers in this journey because it is real, it is doable, it is where it's helping customers, and we are looking forward to, you know, driving that journey with the customers to enable that in their environments and seeing that this is really helping in their capabilities. So something as simple of not sure where to start, just reach out to us and we can get you started.
Beautiful.
Ibett said it.
That is great. Hey, perfect. You guys did a wonderful job. Thank you for sharing all this information. I learned a ton, which I super appreciate. And thank you again for covering this really important topic with us.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and do something wonderful.